The skies above the alien stronghold were filled with fire. Explosions rocked the ground as human warships launched one final strike. The battle had raged for weeks, but now the fate of the war was about to be decided. The human forces had pushed deep into enemy territory, and the time had come for the last assault. Captain Jason Hale, a battle-hardened soldier, stood at the front of the human line. His crew, a mix of men and women who had fought through countless battles, looked to him for leadership. Today, they were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for their future. The alien empire had invaded Earth years ago, but now it was time for humanity to fight back. "Lock on target," Jason shouted over the comms. His voice was steady, despite the chaos unfolding around him. The alien stronghold loomed ahead, a massive fortress surrounded by towering walls and advanced defenses. But Jason knew it could be taken down. His team had trained for this day, and they would succeed. The war had come down to this moment. The sound of artillery fire echoed through the air, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Jason's soldiers pushed forward, their armor glinting in the light as they moved under heavy fire. Jason led the charge, his mind focused on the mission. Get inside the stronghold, retrieve the intelligence, destroy the enemy leadership. As they reached the outer gates, the first explosion hit. A bomb exploded nearby, sending a shockwave through the air. Jason's vision blurred for a moment, and the deafening noise drowned out everything else. "Captain," a voice shouted through the chaos. Jason tried to steady himself, his hand gripping the rifle at his side. He looked around to see his team moving forward, despite the overwhelming firepower from the alien defenses. Then, another explosion. This time, it was too close. The force of the blast knocked Jason to the ground. His body hit the dirt hard, and his breath was stolen from him. Pain surged through his body, but Jason fought through it. He reached for his communicator, trying to call for reinforcements. "Jason, do you read me?" His lieutenant's voice crackled over the comms, but it was too late. The enemy's counterattack was swift, and the stronghold's defenses had overwhelmed them. Jason's vision grew darker as the smoke filled the air. The last thing he saw was the dust settling around him before everything went black. The human forces had assumed the worst. Jason was listed as MIA, presumed dead. His team mourned their loss. They had lost a leader, a hero, and they had no idea what had really happened to him. Back on Earth, the war effort continued, but Jason's death weighed heavily on the soldiers who had known him. They had fought beside him, and now they would fight for him. But what no one knew was that Jason Hale had not died. Jason awoke in darkness, his body broken but still alive. His mask was cracked, and his breaths came in shallow gasps. He was surrounded by the ruins of the alien city, deep in enemy territory, far from the battlefield he had once commanded. How he had survived the explosion was a mystery, but he was alive, and that was all that mattered. He slowly pushed himself up, his fingers digging into the ground for support. His armor was damaged, his body bruised, but he was still breathing. Jason wasn't sure how long he had been out, but one thing was certain. The war wasn't over, and he had a mission to complete. The soldier stood tall, determination in his eyes. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about winning. Jason Hale's mind slowly came back to him, his senses reeling as he tried to make sense of where he was. The air smelled of smoke and burnt metal, and the world around him was hazy. He blinked several times, trying to focus, but the pain in his body made it hard to think clearly. He could feel the weight of his helmet, now cracked and half destroyed, pressing down on his head. His arms felt heavy, and his chest was tight, as if someone had taken a hammer to his ribs. But he was alive. Somehow, he was alive. Jason pushed himself up with shaking hands, his fingers scraping against the rough ground. His vision swam, but he refused to let himself fall back into unconsciousness. He had a mission, and he couldn't fail now. The war wasn't over. He wasn't dead. The world around him looked like a war zone. Buildings were destroyed, Rubble littered the streets, and there was an eerie silence, except for the distant sounds of the enemy forces moving about the city. Jason looked around, trying to find any signs of life. There were none. Only the ruins of the alien city remained, untouched by the chaos of the battlefield. He stumbled to his feet, his legs unsteady beneath him. His body felt like it was made of stone, his muscles sore from the explosion and his injuries. He glanced down at his armor, which had been badly damaged. It was dented, scorched, and covered in dirt, but it was still intact enough to protect him. Jason had no idea how long he had been unconscious, but the fight wasn't over. His objective had been to infiltrate the stronghold and gather intelligence on the alien empire, and that mission still stood. He needed to find a way back into the heart of the enemy territory. He couldn't fail now. He moved cautiously, keeping low to the ground as he made his way through the deserted streets. His training kicked in, and he scanned the area for any signs of danger. The last thing he needed was to be caught off guard by an alien patrol. As he walked deeper into the ruins, Jason noticed something strange. There were no bodies, no signs of battle. The aliens had clearly abandoned the area, but why? Had they retreated, or was something else going on? He continued forward, determined to find answers. The silence around him was unnerving, but Jason didn't let fear control him. He had faced death countless times, and each time he had come out on top. This time wouldn't be any different. Just as he reached a corner, he froze. He heard a faint sound. A voice, barely a whisper. His heart skipped a beat. He was sure he was alone, but the voice was unmistakable. It was close. Jason pressed his back to the wall and carefully peeked around the corner. What he saw took him by surprise. A figure stood in the shadows, cloaked in the darkness of the ruined city. It was an alien, but not one he had seen before. She was tall and regal, with sharp features that could only belong to royalty. The figure turned, revealing a pair of piercing eyes that gleamed with an almost unnatural light. Jason's breath caught in his throat. The alien princess was standing right in front of him. Jason's hand instinctively went to the gun at his side, his heart pounding in his chest. The figure in front of him, no, it wasn't just any alien. This one was different. The tall, elegant being seemed almost otherworldly, her sharp features a mix of beauty and danger. The alien princess stood motionless, her dark eyes scanning the area with a piercing intensity. She hadn't seen him yet. Jason's mind raced. What was she doing here? The city had been abandoned by the enemy forces. Was she a scout, or had she been left behind by the retreating army? He couldn't risk being discovered. Not like this. He needed to move fast, find shelter, and figure out his next move. But something about her presence held him there, frozen in place. The silence stretched on, his mind spinning with the uncertainty of what was happening. Then the princess turned, as if sensing his presence. Her eyes locked onto his, sharp and unblinking, like a predator locking onto prey. For a split second, Jason wondered if he'd been caught, but the princess didn't react immediately. Instead, she stared at him, studying him, as though she were weighing her options. Jason took a step back, hoping to slip away unnoticed. But before he could move, the princess spoke, her voice cool but commanding. "Who are you?" she asked, her tone calm but laced with authority. There was no fear in her voice, no surprise, just a cold curiosity. Jason's heart skipped a beat. The alien princess had spoken to him in perfect English. He didn't know how, but somehow she had understood his language. His mind raced. Was this some sort of trick? Was she trying to get information from him? Or worse, was she leading him into a trap? Jason started, his voice hoarse from the dust and smoke. Just a survivor. The princess tilted her head, her expression unreadable. A survivor? She repeated, her voice still calm, but with an edge. "You should not be here." "I don't have a choice," Jason said, trying to keep his tone neutral. He didn't know how to respond to her. He couldn't tell her who he really was. Not yet. The princess took a step toward him, her movement smooth and graceful, but there was something about her that made Jason feel uneasy. She was in complete control, and every movement of hers radiated power. "You're not supposed to be alive," she said, her voice soft now, almost to herself. "The explosion, it should have killed you." Jason clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay calm. "I'm more resilient than I look." The princess stared at him, a flicker of something in her eyes. Was it disbelief, or perhaps something else? Jason couldn't quite tell, but he was sure of one thing. This wasn't just any alien soldier. This was someone important. "I am the last of my kind to remain in this city," she finally said. "The others have left. The war is over for us." Jason didn't know what to say. She was either lying or speaking the truth, but the look on her face didn't suggest deception. "I need to leave," Jason said, his tone growing more urgent. "I can't afford to stay here." The princess took another step forward, closing the distance between them. Jason's hand instinctively gripped the gun at his side, but he didn't raise it. "Not yet." "Leave." The princess raised an eyebrow. "You don't even know where you are, do you?" Jason didn't respond, but his mind was spinning. Where was he? How had he survived? And what exactly was the princess's role in all of this? As she continued to watch him, a strange sense of understanding seemed to pass between them. A strange, unspoken connection. "You will come with me," the princess said softly. "You're not the only one who has secrets to hide." Jason hesitated for a moment. The princess's demand to follow her felt like a trap, but something in her eyes made him pause. There was no threat in her voice, no aggression, just an unsettling calmness, as though she had already anticipated his next move. "Come with you," Jason repeated, his tone guarded. "And why would I do that?" The princess's gaze never wavered. She tilted her head slightly, as if considering how to explain. "Because," she began, her voice low, "you're not the only one with a reason to be here." Jason took a step back, scanning the princess. She was no ordinary alien soldier. There was something different about her, her grace, her composure. It was clear she wasn't just another member of the alien military. She was royalty, no doubt about it. But why would she be here alone, in the heart of a city that was supposed to be abandoned? Jason couldn't help but wonder if she was in some kind of trouble too. But he couldn't trust her yet. He had his own mission, his own goal. The war wasn't over, and he couldn't let his guard down. "I don't trust you," Jason said bluntly, though his voice wasn't as harsh as he intended. "You could be leading me into a trap. You could be trying to finish what your army started." The princess studied him for a moment. "I know why you think that," she said softly. "You think I'm here to kill you, just like every other alien soldier you fought. But I'm not like them." Jason narrowed his eyes. "What are you talking about?" "Listen," she said, her voice quiet but filled with a quiet authority. "I'm not the enemy. I'm not here to fight you. I'm here because I have no choice. The empire I once served is collapsing. They betrayed me, just like they betrayed everyone else who wasn't part of their plan." Jason blinked in surprise. "What do you mean?" The princess paused before speaking again, her voice filled with bitterness. "I am the heir to the alien empire, but I was raised as nothing more than a weapon. My life was never my own. I was trained to fight, to destroy. But when I saw what my people were doing to your world, I couldn't ignore it anymore." Jason's mind raced. This alien princess wasn't what he had expected. He had thought all aliens were ruthless invaders. But now he was hearing something completely different. "You want to stop the war?" Jason asked slowly. The princess nodded, her eyes steady. "Yes, I want to stop the war. But I can't do it alone." Jason took a deep breath, still unsure of her true intentions. He'd seen too many lies in this war, too many false promises, but there was something about her sincerity that made him pause. "What are you asking from me?" Jason asked, still cautious. "You want me to help you stop the war. How do I even know you're telling the truth?" The princess stepped closer, her voice steady. You don't have to trust me completely. But you should know this. I can offer you the opportunity to end this war. Not with more violence, but with something better. I'm not like the rest of them. Jason's mind was spinning. Everything he had known about the alien empire was based on years of fighting, of seeing them as the enemy. But now, the lines were beginning to blur. I'll come with you, Jason said, his voice firm. But only because I need to know more. If you're telling the truth, I want to hear it all. The princess nodded, her expression softening just slightly. Then follow me. There's much more to the story, and I'll show you what's left of it. Jason didn't know what lay ahead, but he had no choice. He couldn't go back to Earth without knowing the full truth. The war had changed him. But now, the question was whether it was too late to change the course of history. Jason followed the princess through the ruins, keeping a cautious distance. The streets were eerily quiet, the usual sounds of combat and alien technology absent. The city had once been alive with activity, but now it felt abandoned, as though the alien empire had just picked up and left. The princess moved with a grace that Jason couldn't help but notice. Despite the destruction around them, she seemed completely unbothered. It was clear that she had been trained for war, but there was something else, something in the way she carried herself. She was regal, but not in a way that made her seem untouchable. It was the way her eyes seemed to understand the world, the way she spoke with a calm certainty. After a few minutes of walking in silence, Jason couldn't hold back any longer. Why should I trust you? He asked, keeping his voice low. The princess glanced over her shoulder at him. You don't have to trust me completely. But I'm not your enemy, Jason. You can be part of something bigger than just the war, something that could change everything. Jason scoffed quietly. Change everything? You're asking me to believe that you, a princess of the empire, want to end the war. That doesn't make sense. You're the enemy, just like the rest of them. She stopped walking and turned to face him. Her eyes softened, but there was a fire behind them that Jason hadn't seen before. I used to believe that too, she said, her voice firm. But the empire I was born into, it's not the empire I want to be a part of. I've seen enough. I've watched the destruction, the lives lost, and I can't be a part of that anymore. Jason studied her face, searching for any sign of deceit. She was still an alien, still a part of the enemy that had ravaged his world. But there was something in her words that made him pause, something he hadn't expected to hear from someone who had been raised to be a weapon. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice steady now. I want you to help me stop it, the princess replied, her tone growing more serious. You've seen the horrors of this war. I need your help to end it. Not with more bloodshed, but with strategy, with diplomacy. We need to dismantle the empire from the inside, and we need someone who understands the human perspective. You've fought this war for too long, Jason. We can't go on like this. Jason looked away, his mind racing. He had spent years fighting, watching his comrades fall, his world burn. He didn't know how to stop the fighting. He only knew how to survive. How could he trust her? How could he risk everything on someone who had once been his enemy? But he had to admit, he didn't have all the answers, and for the first time, someone else was offering a way forward, even if it was uncertain. I'm not saying I believe you, Jason said, his voice gruff. But I'll help you. For now. The princess nodded, her expression unreadable. That's all I ask. They continued walking, the silence hanging between them like a weight. Jason couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping into something much bigger than just a war. He didn't know if he could trust the princess, but he also knew that this fragile alliance might be their only chance at ending the conflict. As they moved deeper into the city, Jason wondered what kind of future they were walking toward. The war had defined his life for so long, but now, the princess had given him a glimpse of something different. He didn't know if it would work, or if it was even possible. But for the first time, he felt a flicker of hope. and that scared him. The ruins of the alien city seemed endless, a maze of destroyed buildings and twisted metal. Jason and the princess moved through the wreckage, their footsteps the only sound in the silence. The city was a ghost town. Its inhabitants had fled, leaving only remnants of their once grand empire. Jason kept his eyes on their surroundings, his senses on high alert. Despite the princess's assurances, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The war had taught him to trust no one, and even now, as he walked beside the alien princess, he had his doubts. But there was no turning back now. "We're getting closer," the princess said quietly, her voice calm but with a hint of urgency. "The hideout is just beyond this sector. It's safe for now, but we can't afford to waste time." Jason nodded, keeping his distance. "I don't know what you're planning, but if this is another trick—" "It's not," she interrupted, her voice sharp. "I'm not here to deceive you, Jason. This is my only chance. I want to stop the Empire, and for that I need you." Jason didn't respond. He was tired, physically and mentally. Every step was a reminder of how much had changed since the battle, since the explosion that had nearly taken his life. He had survived, but it felt as if everything around him had crumbled. The war he had fought in for so long had become a tangled mess of alliances, betrayal, and survival. Now this princess was offering him something different, something he wasn't sure he could believe in. But still, he followed her. He couldn't deny the chance that this might be his only way to end the war. They walked for what felt like hours, moving through dark alleys and beneath broken buildings. The city was quiet, too quiet. Jason was sure they weren't the only ones left here. Somewhere in the distance, he heard the faint sound of movement, the rustle of something. Someone, watching. His hand instinctively went to his gun, but the princess held up her hand. "We're almost there." The small room was dimly lit, casting long shadows on the walls. Jason stood at the center, his eyes scanning every corner as he tried to make sense of his situation. The princess had led him here, promising that no one would find them. The night was quiet in the hideout, but the air between Jason and the princess felt charged, as if a storm was about to break. The weight of their plan hung over them like a dark cloud. They had both agreed that the time to act was now. The Empire, with its stranglehold on the galaxy, had to fall. But how they would bring it down was the question. Jason looked at the map the princess had laid out on the table. It was a blueprint of the Empire's core, the heart of its leadership, their target. A High Council, a group of the most powerful individuals in the Empire. If they could eliminate or divide the Council, the Empire might crumble. "This is it," the princess said, her voice steady despite the obvious danger. "We're going to strike at the heart of the Empire. We have no room for failure." Jason ran a hand through his short, messy hair. He had been fighting for so long, but this mission felt different. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about changing everything, stopping the war that had torn his world apart. He couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. "And you're sure this is the right time?" Jason asked, his voice careful. "I don't want to rush in blind." The princess nodded, her eyes focused on the map. "We've been gathering intel for months. The council is split, and there's unrest among the high-ranking officers. They're vulnerable. If we strike now, while they're distracted, we might just have a chance." Jason considered her words. It seemed like a long shot, but it was the best chance they had. If they didn't act now, the Empire would continue its brutal reign, destroying everything in its path. It was now or never. "We'll need allies," Jason said, looking up from the map. "We can't do this alone." "I know," the princess replied. "I've already arranged for some help. There are rebels who want to see the Empire fall. They'll join us, but it will be dangerous. The Empire's soldiers are everywhere." Jason nodded grimly. The Empire had spies, soldiers, and advanced technology. No matter how many allies they gathered, they would always be outnumbered. But he couldn't back down now. The mission was clear. "You've been planning this for a long time, haven't you?" Jason said, his voice softer now. The princess's gaze softened. "Yes. I knew the day I decided to run from the Empire that I would have to fight for my freedom, and for the freedom of everyone who has suffered under their rule." Jason felt a deep respect for her then. She had lived in the heart of the Empire, seen its darkness, and yet she had chosen to fight against it. That kind of strength was rare. Jason didn't know if he could trust her completely, but he knew one thing. She was committed to the cause, and that made her different from the Empire she had once served. "We go tomorrow," Jason said, his voice steady. "No more waiting. We do this now." The princess met his gaze, her eyes hardening with determination. "Yes, we do this now." The next day, they set their plan into motion. The princess led the way, guiding Jason through the dark streets and secret paths that only she knew. They met with the rebels in a hidden location, a small underground base deep in the city. The rebels were just as committed as the princess, their faces hardened with the knowledge of what they were about to do. They knew the risks, but they also knew that this was their only chance to bring the Empire to its knees. Jason looked around at the group of rebels. They were different from the soldiers he had fought alongside in the past. These people had nothing to lose. They weren't fighting for glory or honor. They were fighting for a future free of the Empire's control. "We're ready," the princess said, her voice filled with quiet confidence. Jason looked at her, and for the first time, he felt like they might actually win. It wasn't just about taking down an empire anymore. It was about changing everything. And they were about to start. The tension in the air was thick as Jason and the princess stood at the entrance of the High Council's stronghold. It was an imposing structure, massive and heavily fortified, sitting like a dark sentinel in the heart of the Empire. This was it, the final step. If they succeeded, the war could end. If they failed, everything they had fought for would be lost. Jason glanced at the princess, his eyes narrowing as they took in the heavily guarded fortress. "We make it through here, and it's over, right?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. The princess nodded. "Yes. Once we break the council, we'll have the power to bring the Empire down. But we have to be quick. They'll be expecting us soon." The plan had been simple. Get inside, infiltrate the heart of the Empire, and split the council's leadership. But Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. They had a handful of rebels with them, but the rest of the Empire's forces were waiting, lurking just outside. Jason tightened his grip on his weapon. "Let's go. The sooner we do this, the sooner it's over." With a nod, the princess led the way, her steps calculated and precise. The rebels followed closely, moving in the shadows, their faces masked with determination. The weight of the moment pressed down on Jason as they approached the gates. He had seen his fair share of battles, but nothing like this. This was more than just a fight for survival. It was a fight for everything. As they reached the outer wall, the princess pointed to a narrow entrance on the side, hidden from view by the shadows. "This is our way in," she said quietly. They moved quickly, slipping through the entrance without making a sound. Inside, the atmosphere shifted. The air felt heavier, and Jason could feel the pulse of power that emanated from the council chambers. They were close, too close. It was almost as if the Empire itself was aware of their presence. "Stay sharp," Jason muttered to the rebels behind him. "This is it." They crept through the halls, avoiding the guards stationed along the corridors. Jason's heart raced as they drew nearer to the council room. It was now or never. The rebellion they had fought for, the lives they had sacrificed. It all came down to this one moment. At last, they reached the chamber doors. The princess motioned for everyone to stop. She looked at Jason, her eyes filled with purpose. "Are you ready?" Jason gave a short nod. "Let's finish this." The princess stepped forward, and with one swift movement, she kicked the doors open. The council members, seated at a long table, looked up in shock. The room was filled with powerful figures of the Empire, leaders who had made decisions that had cost countless lives. And now, they were about to face the consequences of their actions. "End it," one of the council members shouted, reaching for a hidden weapon beneath the table. But before he could draw, the princess fired a shot, hitting his hand and knocking the weapon away. The room erupted into chaos. Rebels stormed in, overpowering the few guards who had been stationed inside. Jason moved swiftly, his training taking over. The council members tried to resist, but they were no match for the rebels' determination and the surprise of the attack. "You thought you could rule the galaxy with fear," the princess said, her voice echoing through the chamber. "But today, it ends." Jason's eyes locked onto the leader of the council, the one who had ordered the destruction of Earth. His hand tightened around his weapon, but before he could take a step forward, the princess raised her hand, stopping him. "He's mine," she said coldly, her gaze never leaving the council leader. Jason stepped back, giving her space. He knew this moment was hers to take. It wasn't just about ending the war. It was about reclaiming her own freedom, her own future. With one swift motion, the princess moved forward, her weapon aimed at the council leader. "This is for everyone you've destroyed." The chaos in the council room slowly settled. The sounds of struggle faded into silence, replaced only by the heavy breathing of the rebels and the defeated murmurs of the Empire's leadership. Jason stood at the back of the room, watching as the princess faced the council leader. His fate was sealed. The battle for the Empire was over. The princess, her expression cold and resolute, kept her weapon aimed at the council leader. He stood there, shaking with fear, his face pale as he realized the power he had held for so long was slipping away. This was no longer the Empire's world. It was hers. And it was Jason's. "You have destroyed so much," the princess said, her voice steady, but filled with a quiet fury. "And now, you will answer for every life you've ruined." The council leader's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape, but there was nowhere to run. His empire had collapsed. The rebels had overrun the palace, and the princess had taken control of the council. Jason took a deep breath. He hadn't been sure how he would feel when this moment came, but seeing the princess take her rightful place in the world gave him a sense of hope he hadn't known in years. She wasn't just a princess anymore. She was a symbol of something greater, a leader who had fought to change everything. The princess looked at Jason, her eyes softening for the first time since they had met. She gave him a small, appreciative nod. "You've helped me get here," she said quietly. "I won't forget it." Jason nodded, but his mind was focused on what came next. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. Rebuilding what had been destroyed, repairing the broken relationships, and creating a future that could prevent another empire from rising. There would be no easy answers, but the first step was taken. The council leader was escorted away by the rebels, his face twisted with defeat. The Empire's hold on the galaxy had finally been broken, but there was much left to do. As the princess turned back to the remaining council members, Jason could see her strength returning. This wasn't just a victory, it was the beginning of something new. "I think it's time we start making the changes we promised," the princess said, addressing the rebels and the few surviving members of the council. "We will build a new government, one that serves the people, not the powerful few." Jason couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The princess wasn't just taking revenge. She was creating a future. It wasn't about control anymore. It was about freedom. "We'll help you," Jason said, his voice firm. "Whatever it takes. We'll rebuild this galaxy." The princess smiled, a genuine, warm smile that Jason had never seen from her before. "We will do it together, and it will be better than before." As they moved out of the council room, Jason took one last look at the wreckage of the Empire. The walls, once symbols of power and fear, now stood broken. The sun outside was beginning to rise, casting a golden light across the horizon. The dawn of a new day was here, one that promised hope, change, and a chance for a future without war. Jason couldn't help but think back to everything that had led them to this moment. The battles, the pain, the struggle. But now, it was over. They had fought for something bigger than themselves, and together they had won. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Jason believed it could be bright.